Hi there and welcome back to 355 Code. Today we'll be doing another game tutorial with JavaScript and we'll be learning how to make Blackjack. This will be the first video in the series and there will be several videos and you can either try and have a go at it yourself. I will try and kind of explain the stages and give you a chance to try things by yourself in each stage, or you can just follow along, code along, or just watch. So let's dive right in. So what you can see here is kind of the final game. Obviously it doesn't have to look exactly like this. You can change the styling or change some of the functionality, but this is kind of our goal, to have a game of Blackjack. If you're not familiar with Blackjack, I will link rules in the description below. But basically the dealer and the player both start off with 2 cards, and one of the dealer's cards is hidden. And then the goal is to get 21, but not above. And whoever gets the highest within 21 is the winner. And there are several other rules, but that should suffice for now, and I'll kind of explain a little more on the way. Let me just kind of show you how this game works. So as you can see, the hands are dealt, and then as the player I can choose to hit, which is add another card or pass. Since 17 is quite close to 21, I'm going to pass, and the dealer was bust. The dealer went over 21, so I won, and now we deal the next hand. The dealer has queen, which is worth 10, and I have a7, which could be either 8 or 18. Since 18 is quite high, I'm going to pass again. Dealer busts, and I win again. I'm having a winning streak here. And now I have 6 and 2, so I'm going to hit. And I get another card. Now I have 18 total, so I'm going to pass. And then the dealer had 20, so the dealer won the hand. And then we deal the next hand. And then the game just keeps on going on and on forever. So that's what we're trying to build today. And if you hop over to the starter code, which I also will link to in the link below, you can see that I've already set up the HTML and the CSS, so you don't have to worry about styling and kind of mapping things out on the page. And I'll show you what it looks like. So you can see we have the titles for the dealer hand and the player hand. We have the hit and pass buttons. Obviously these won't do anything yet because we haven't coded in our JavaScript. What I've prepared for you here in the JavaScript section is, one, the values of all the cards, so that's ace to king. And we have the 4 different suits, and they are strings here. And then what we have here is, first of all, just all of our elements that we'll be using later on, but we won't be touching on this right now. And a card model, which we will use to create more cards later on. And as we touch on each of these things, I'll be explaining a little bit more. So first of all, let's try and break down our problem. So step by step, what do we need? So first of all, we're going to need a deck of cards. Okay, and this deck of cards is going to be created using these values and suits. Each deck of cards has 52 cards, and that's 14 cards of each suit. Right? We have 13 cards. My bad. So ace to 10, that's 10 cards, and then jack, queen, king, that's 13, and then 13 times 4, okay, for each suit. And after we have a deck of cards, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to shuffle several decks. Okay, so basically the way Blackjack works is that we don't only use one deck, but we use sometimes several decks to make it harder to guess what the next cards will be, something called counting cards. Maybe you've heard of it. So we'll want to shuffle several decks together, and shuffling basically means that our card selection will be random. Obviously we can't physically shuffle because these cards are not real. But the next thing that we're going to want to do is to select a card, and I'm going to write here that it's going to be random. Okay, so there's kind of 2 ways that we can go at this, and I'll explain when we get to that point. Basically, we're going to want to select a random card, and we're going to want to allocate it to either the dealer or the player. So then we're going to have to give deal hands to dealer and player. Okay, and that's going to be using this random card selection. So we're going to be selecting 4 random cards, 2 for the dealer, 2 for the player. And then I'm going to write a note here that we're going to want to hide one of dealer's cards. Okay, we're going to want to do that. It doesn't necessarily have to be in this order, but it's going to be something that's going to happen at around that point. And then we're going to have to give the option to hit or pass. And then here we kind of split into 2 options. So, whoops. And one option is going to be if hit, add card. And if pass, then we are going to want to let the dealer play. Okay, so that the dealer has set rules for when they pass and when they hit, and they're programmed in advance. So we can just calculate that depending on the value of the dealer's hand. And then after both of the players are done, then we will need to determine the winner and then deal the next hand. Okay, so it seems like quite a long process, and we're not going to be doing it all in one video. Today, I just really want to focus on how we're going to get the deck of cards and how we're going to shuffle several decks together. So let's take a look at that. So first of all, let's focus on creating a deck of cards. So we're going to do this in a function, and I'm just going to call this create deck. And it's not going to take any parameters. And what it's going to do basically is we need to create combinations with our values and our suits. Okay, so this is going to be a nested loop. And basically what we can say is for, we could just say, actually, we don't even need a for loop. We could use values dot for each value. And then what we're going to do is, within that for each, we're also going to loop through the suits. So it's going to be suits dot for each suit. And then we are going to basically create a card. Okay, so let's say const card equals to value plus suit. Okay, so we're combining 2 strings here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just console.log our card. Okay, it's important to do this from time to time just so you can visually see that your code is working. And then let's call this function create deck. Okay, so I'm going to run the code. And you can see here that all of my cards are being created, and we have, this ace of 4 kinds, 2 of 4 kinds, etc. I'm just going to, for the sense, it actually doesn't make a real difference, but I just want to show you, like, if I change around here suits and values, and then run our code again, then you'll see that we're actually getting this in order. So we have, ace until king of spades, ace until king of hearts, etc. And I'm going to leave it like this because this is kind of how a fresh deck of cards actually comes in the box. So it's a little more not nostalgic, but close to the real thing. So we'll leave it at that for now, even though it makes no difference to our game. Great. So I hope that's what you arrived at yourself. As I said, I'm going to pause now, and I'm going to let you see if you can figure out how to shuffle several decks together. And you don't really actually need to shuffle them because when we select a card at random, Essentially, that's equivalent to shuffling the decks. So you can actually leave the decks in order, but what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to attach several decks together. So if you want, you could pause the video and try and create a function that will combine a certain amount of decks together. Okay, so if you're back here, then let's try and approach this problem. So let's call this shuffle decks. And again, we're not really shuffling here, but just that's the equivalent action of what we're doing here. And basically what we want to do is we're going to want to pass a number here. Okay, and this shuffle decks is going to return, it could either return all the decks, or we can use a global variable. And because our code is going to need to access this deck of cards throughout our whole code base, I'm actually going to create a global variable for all of our decks, okay? So I'm going to declare it right here under all of our elements. So let's call it all decks. And this actually can change. This is not constant, so let's use camel casing here. And this will just be an empty array, okay? And then basically what we want to do is when we shuffle the decks, all we want to do is for let I equal 0 as long as I is smaller than a number, okay, than the number that we put in here in terms of how many decks we want, and then I++. Okay, a very simple for loop. And then each time that this loops through, what we're going to want to do is we are going to want to say new deck equals create deck. Okay, and it's important here that instead of consoling our card at the end, what we're going to do here is we're actually going to return a deck. Okay, so in order to return a deck, what we need to do is actually make some modifications to our deck function, and we're going to need to have a constant here that's called deck, and it's going to be an empty array. And then here, for each card that we create, we're actually going to say deck.push card. And then after we're done creating our deck, then we will return our deck. Okay, and just to show you what that looks like, I'm going to actually comment out this code here. And now here, instead of just calling create deck, I'm going to console.log create deck. Oops. And I'm going to run the code, and you can see here that now we have an array with all of the values being returned to us. So when I shuffle decks and I create a new deck that's using the create deck function, this should be equal to an array of all the cards. And then all we need to do is we need to push all decks.push new deck. Okay, so we're basically just combining several decks together. And then what we can do here if we want is console.log all decks. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to call shuffle decks, and let's give it a number of 5. Okay, so I'm mixing 5 decks together. Whoops, and our code snapped. Okay. So this is one of the reasons that it's important to save, which I hadn't been doing. So I'm going to quickly write out the code again, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, and I'm back, and so this should be pretty much the code as we had it before. Here I just need to change suits to uppercase. Values. Excellent. Okay, so what we're going to want to do now is figure out why we had an error. And I'm going to run our code again. And let's see, all dex is not defined. I forgot to define that again. So let's say is an array. And save. And let's try running the code again. And nothing is happening. Let me add the console.log all dex, save, run the code, boom, it broke. So in SoloLearn, the code just completely snapped, but we have to remember that we're still in a regular browser, so what we can actually do is inspect the page and try and figure out from the console here what broke our code, even though we don't have that. So let's see, e.length minus 1.split is not a function. Okay, so it's not very informative. So let's try reloading our code and just taking a look and seeing what might have broken our code. And don't forget that this is part of coding. I'm sure you're going to encounter some bugs. And as you can see, I encounter bugs all the time as well. So let's try and figure that out. So all dex is an array, and here we are pushing a new deck. So let's try, before consoling, let's console.log new deck, just to make sure that's working. So let's run our code again, and as we can see, we have here we have 5 decks here, and I'm trying to push this to the array. So one thing that I'm already picking up on is that here I probably should not be using push. I don't think that should be throwing an error, but let me explain what's going on here. So basically all dex is an array, okay? And each time I push, I'm actually pushing in a new array. So what I'm getting here is an array of arrays, which is actually not what I want. Actually, I want just one big array with just lots and lots and lots of items that's all the dex together. And the way that we would do that is say that all dex is equal to, and here we're going to use a spreader. So it's basically all dex, and then we want to spread in the new deck. Okay, and this way, we're actually going to be creating a new array, and it's an array that includes all of the items from all of the arrays in one large array. So let's try, I'm going to save now this time, learn my lesson, and run the code again, and assign it to constant variable. Okay, so here I made all dex a constant, and I actually want it to be something that can be changed, like I'm doing here. So let's save that again and run, and great. So now you can see here that I have a huge deck with 259 cards. Okay, so that is what we wanted. And this is basically the deck that we're going to be selecting a card from each time. So I don't have the stages here anymore because it got erased when the code broke. But I can already tell you that the next stage was going to be to select a random card. Okay, which is the equivalent of shuffling. Okay. So you can pause the video now if you want and see if you can figure out how to select one random card from our combination from all decks. Okay, so if you want, you can pause the video now. And if you're still watching, then I'm going to be showing you how to do that. So we're going to be using another function, and let's say we'll call this select random card. Okay, and this function will need to select a card at random. So in order to do that, we're going to need a random number. Okay, And this, to create a random number in JavaScript, we use a pretty common method, which is math.floor, and within it math.random. Okay, because math.random will return a random number from 0 to 1, and math.floor will round it down. And basically what we need to do here is we need to multiply this random number between 0 and 1 by a certain multiplier in order to create a range for our selection. And basically we want our range to be from 0, okay, if you look here on the right, from 0 until 259. Okay, so basically that is the length of this array. So we here just need to multiply by all dex dot length. Okay, and because we're using math.floor, we'll actually never reach the number that is the length of the array, which would be one more, which would be 260, and floor will take it down, so it'll be from 0 till one number before the final number in the all-dex array, or the final index. So let's save this in a constant of random number, or let's call it random index, because that's what we're actually getting here. And let's just console this so you can see visually what we have here. So random index, and here instead of calling, we're going to call shuffle dex, because we need to create our mixed deck. And then here under it, I'm going to call select random card. And let's save and run, and 94, and do it again, 173, etc. So you can see we're getting random numbers here between 0 and the high hundreds, and if you believe me, then it's until the size of all decks. And then once we have our random index, we need to select the random card. So our card is going to be equal to all decks at the index of random index. Okay, and then all we have to do is return this card. Okay, so now if I say const random card equals select random card, and I console.log random card, then let's run our code, and you'll see that we get back a card. So ace of diamonds, 8 of spades, 10 of diamonds, etc. Great, so that was selecting a random card. And there's actually one more thing that we can do here, and that is we want the card that we select to be taken out of the decks, okay? Because that's how a real game of blackjack would work. Once the cards are given out to the players, the card is no longer in the deck, and as soon as the decks are depleted, then new decks are mixed in. So how do we go about removing the card from the deck? So in order to do that, after we we select the card using the random index, we're actually going to want to slice this this card from the decks, and that way we do that is using all decks dot slice. And then what we need to do here is give the start number, which will be our random index. And then, okay, 1 second, let me make sure I'm using the right method here, because there's slice and there's splice. And we have to start and define the slice contains 0, returns a copy, a section of the array for -2 the last. Okay, so let's see. I think maybe I was supposed to be using splice here. And worst case, we can check the documentation. Yes, so actually we want to use splice, my bad. So slice would have given us another array, And splice is just to remove elements from a certain point and until has many the delete count, as you can see here, the number of items that we want to remove. So we want to start from the random index, and we want to remove 1. Okay, we just want to remove this random index. And let's try running our code again. I'll save it as well. Okay, so you can see here that we selected the 3 of clubs. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add another console.log just so we can see what the index is. So let's say random index. And now I'm going to run the code again. So the index was 99 and we got the 9 of diamonds, just because there are several 9 of diamonds. So let's go to 99 here. Well, first of all, you can check and you can see that now, where are we logging this? Okay, so we're logging all decks here, which is not what I want actually. So actually let's console.log all decks here after we've selected the random card. And now if you take a look here, you'll see that there's 258 cards. Okay, so we definitely removed a card. Now let's make sure that we remove the right card. So it's a 10 of spades, but there's lots of 10s of spades, 5 to be exact. And we removed it from place number 9. So if we look here, 8, 9, 10. And if we look here, there's 9 of spades and jack of spades, but there's no 10 of spades. So we removed the card from the deck. And now we can actually allocate this card to a player. So that's where we're going to stop this video for today. So what we did is we created several decks using our values and our suits. We mixed a few decks together to create a big pile of decks that we're going to be selecting our cards from. And we learned how to select a random card from these decks. And starting from the next video, we're going to be explaining how to deal the hands out to the dealer and the player. So thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time.